My name is Cassandra Wilson, I'm 32, and for the last 7 years, I've been the executive assistant to one of Seattle's most powerful corporate CEOs. I thought loyalty meant something in this company. I thought friendship did too. But that morning, when I walked into the boardroom and saw my best friend Lena standing in my spot presenting my project, I realized just how wrong I was. The entire room hung on her every word. The slides, the data, the strategy, every single detail was mine. I'd spent 4 months building that proposal. Late nights, missed birthdays, coffee-stained drafts and tears I never let anyone see. And now, she was pitching it like she'd created it from scratch. My throat went dry. I could barely breathe as I heard the CEO say, "Brilliant work, Lena. This could secure our $420 million merger with Blackwood Industries." That number hit me like a punch to the gut. $420 million. My idea, my concept was about to become the backbone of the company's biggest deal in decades. And Lena would be the one getting the promotion, the spotlight, and the glory. I should have said something right there. But my voice died in my chest, replaced by disbelief. She looked me in the eye just 2 days ago, hugged me, told me I was the smartest woman in the office, and now, she was cutting my throat with my own words. I stood there, frozen at the door, clutching the folder I'd printed that morning, the one titled Project Phoenix. My initials were right there on the front page. But no one noticed me. No one ever did. That's when I realized something deep inside me had snapped. It wasn't just betrayal, it was humiliation. And humiliation has a way of lighting fires you can't put out. If you're watching this, tell me where you're from in the comments, hit like, and subscribe. Because what I did next, no one saw coming. When Lena walked out of that boardroom smiling, she had no idea I still had access to every file, every password, and every secret her success was built on. After that meeting, I went back to my desk like nothing had happened. The office buzzed with congratulations for Lena, not realizing that the person who built the empire was sitting right in front of them, silent, invisible, and boiling. "Cass, can you grab the updated merger files from legal?" she asked sweetly later that day, acting like we were still best friends. I wanted to throw my coffee in her face. Instead, I smiled. "Sure thing, Lena." It was the calmest lie I'd ever told. Because while she thought she'd won, I was already planning my next move. That evening, I stayed late under the excuse of wrapping up client reports. The cleaning crew passed by, nodding politely. The building emptied. The city lights of Seattle shimmered across the glass walls like 1,000 witnesses. And then, I opened my private drive. Every document, every email, every timestamp showing when I had created the project files was right there. I had proof, but revenge isn't just about proof, it's about timing. If I exposed her right then, she'd claim it was a collaboration, or that I was confused. HR would sweep it under the rug, and I'd be labeled difficult. No, I needed her to walk straight into her own trap. Over the next week, I played my role perfectly. I congratulated her, supported her, even helped her refine parts of my presentation as the merger talks progressed. Every smile I gave her was sharpened like a blade. One afternoon, she leaned over my desk, perfume sweet and smug. "Cass, you're such a lifesaver. I couldn't have done this without you." Oh, the irony. I bit my tongue so hard it almost bled. That night, I sent a quiet message to an old contact in the IT department, someone who owed me a favor. A digital favor. By morning, I would have something Lena could never explain away. What I found buried in her inbox didn't just prove she stole my work, it revealed a secret that could destroy the entire $420 million merger. The next morning, I came in early before anyone else. My stomach churned from too much coffee and too little sleep. The quiet hum of the office servers filled the air as I slipped a flash drive into my computer. My IT contact had delivered. Inside a hidden folder labeled Betrayal were emails that made my pulse spike. Lena hadn't just stolen my project, she'd been feeding information to Blackwood Industries' lead negotiator. Confidential data, internal figures, entire slides from our merger plan. In one email, she wrote, "If you guarantee me a director-level position post-merger, I'll make sure the integration plan stays in your favor." She sold us out. She sold me out. For weeks, I'd thought her betrayal ended at stealing my work. But this was treason against the entire company. And it gave me leverage that could shatter everything. I sat there trembling, the glow of the monitor reflecting off the tears in my eyes. I wasn't sure if I wanted to cry or laugh. Maybe both. When Lena strolled in later, holding her designer latte like she owned the floor, I met her with the sweetest smile I could muster. "Morning, Lena. Big day ahead?" She grinned. "Yeah, just a few more meetings and I'm golden." Oh, she was golden, all right, like fool's gold. Shiny on the outside, rotten underneath. That night, I backed up every single piece of evidence. I encrypted it, hid copies in cloud drives, even mailed one USB to my sister across town. If this was going to be war, I wasn't going in unarmed. For days, I kept my composure. I watched her charm the CEO, flirt with executives, and talk about our project as if she had given birth to it. But with every fake smile, my revenge sharpened. I wasn't going to the HR department. I wasn't going to the police. I was going straight to the top where it would hurt most. If the CEO saw what I saw, the entire merger would implode. And when it did, I'd be right there, holding the match. Before I could expose Lena, someone else in the company uncovered a detail that turned everything upside down, and suddenly, I wasn't the only one hunting her. The first sign came on a rainy Thursday. I was at my desk, pretending to finalize travel schedules, when a message popped up on my screen. From David Chen, Senior Financial Analyst. Subject: "We need to talk off the record." My heart skipped. David wasn't the kind of guy who messaged people casually. Quiet, sharp, and utterly by the book. If he was reaching out, something serious was brewing. We met that evening at a small cafe near Pike Place. The rain streaked the windows and steam rose from our cups. He leaned in, his voice low. "Cassandra, have you noticed inconsistencies in the merger data?" I blinked. "You mean the Blackwood reports?" He nodded. "Yeah, someone's been altering numbers, grossly inflating our projected synergy values. It's fraud, plain and simple." I felt my pulse in my throat. He didn't know it yet, but I did. Lena's fingerprints were all over those files. I took a cautious breath. "David, if I told you I knew who was behind it, would you believe me?" He studied me for a moment, then nodded. "I would." So I told him, well, some of it. Not everything, not yet. Just enough to make him understand that Lena wasn't who she seemed. I showed him one email, the one where she promised data manipulation to sweeten the deal. His jaw clenched. "She's risking prison time." I smiled faintly. "She's risking a lot more than that." That was the first time I felt it shift. I wasn't alone anymore. The office politics that once suffocated me had turned into a battlefield, and I finally had an ally who saw the truth. Over the next few days, David and I quietly gathered data, cross-checking reports, collecting timestamps, and aligning evidence. The deeper we dug, the darker it got. Money laundering, insider communication, hidden offshore payments. It wasn't just Lena. There were others, and when I realized who those others were, the air left my lungs. Her little betrayal wasn't just personal, it was the thread in a much bigger corporate cover-up. If I pulled it, the entire $420 million merger and everyone tied to it would unravel. When I uncovered the name of the executive funding Lena's deceit, I realized revenge wasn't enough anymore. This was about survival. The executive's name was Robert Langford, the company's chief operations officer and Lena's secret mentor. He was the kind of man people whispered about in elevators. Smooth talker, ruthless negotiator, and according to the company grapevine, untouchable. When I first saw his name in those offshore transfer records, I thought it had to be a mistake, but the evidence didn't. Lena's private communications were routed through his encrypted account. Every shady payment she received came from one of his shell companies. My stomach turned cold. Lena wasn't just stealing my project. She was helping Langford rig the entire merger from the inside. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, laptop glowing in the dark. The sound of rain against the window mixed with my own heartbeat. My mind raced through every conversation I'd ever had with him, his subtle smirks, the way he called me kiddo like I didn't belong in the same room. He once told me, "You're sharp, Cassandra." Too sharp sometimes. Now I knew what he meant. I felt anger boiling again, but this time it was cleaner, focused. Lena was a pawn, but Langford was the player. And players like him only respected one thing: exposure. So I started building what I called the package. It wasn't just the stolen project Annemarie, it was every lie, every forged number, every confidential transfer. I built a digital folder that, if leaked, could blow up the entire $420 million merger and take half the executive board down with it. David helped me verify the financial inconsistencies. We moved like ghosts, sharing files through encrypted drives and coded subject lines. But danger has a smell, and apparently, Lena could sense it. She started acting strange, nervous, always checking over her shoulder. Once, I caught her whispering to Langford outside the boardroom, her face pale. Then one morning, I arrived to find a formal envelope waiting on my desk. Cassandra Wilson termination notice, no explanation. No meeting, just silence. My breath caught in my chest. They'd found out, but they didn't know one thing: I still had the package. And now, I had nothing left to lose. The day after I was fired, I made the most dangerous decision of my life, one that would either destroy them or destroy me. The moment I read the words termination notice, my whole body went numb. Just like that 7 years of loyalty erased with a single sheet of paper. No warning, no explanation, just a guard standing by the elevator, watching as I packed my things into a box like I was some kind of criminal. Lena didn't even look at me. She passed my desk, pretending to be on the phone, her voice trembling just enough to sound innocent. I caught her reflection in the glass wall smirking. That was the moment I decided I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to beg. I was going to finish what I started. I left the building in the pouring rain, my box soaked through before I reached the parking lot. I sat in my car for almost an hour, staring at the skyline of Seattle. Every drop of water sliding down the windshield felt like time counting down to their downfall. They thought firing me would silence me, but all they did was set me free. That night, I opened my laptop and unzipped the package. I organized every piece of evidence: financial fraud, internal manipulation, stolen data, false statements. I even recorded a short video explaining everything in my own voice. No emotion, no tears, just truth. The kind of truth that could end careers. I had 3 options: send it anonymously to the press, deliver it directly to the company's board, use it to negotiate my way back with leverage they couldn't ignore. David called around midnight. "Cass, I heard what happened. They blindsided you." "Yeah," I said, my voice calm. "But it's not over. What are you going to do?" I smiled, even though he couldn't see it. "Burn them all down digitally." He was silent for a long time. Then he whispered, "Then I'm in." The next morning, before sunrise, I parked across from corporate headquarters. The building glowed silver in the dawn light, like nothing bad could ever happen inside. But before the day ended, that illusion would crack and everyone inside would finally see who Cassandra Wilson really was. By noon, the $420 million merger meeting began, and I was about to crash it with a revelation that would leave every executive speechless. I parked 2 blocks away. I watched them file into the glass cathedral of our headquarters, suits, smiles, rehearsed handshakes. They were about to sign their signatures on 420 million reasons to pat themselves on the back. I had no business card left in my wallet, no title, no badge, just a USB and a belief that truth was louder than HR memos. I slipped past security with a visitor badge I'd printed the night before. Small, sharp lies. They let me in because I smiled like I belonged, because I used to belong. Because nobody expected the fired assistant to be a saboteur, the boardroom was full. Cameras, microphones, coffee cups. Screens flared to life as the CEO smiled and welcomed their Blackwood guests. Lena sat 2 seats from the head, radiant. Langford sat smug and centered, like a man who owns storms. I walked in like I was late. Heads turned. A murmur. Someone frowned. The CEO blinked. Then recognition. The color drained from Lena's face like paint running in the rain. Cassandra? The CEO said, voice clipped. What are you? I held up the USB. No speeches. No theatrics. No lawyers. I kept my voice steady. You need to see this. Someone reached for security. I pointed to the projection screen. Play it. The room froze. Security hesitated. Then the CEO, with the poise of a man who liked control, nodded. The tech team played the file. Emails scrolled. Numbers blinked. A voice clip, Lena promising favors. A ledger showing transfers from Langford's shell companies. Screenshots. Time-stamped edits. Evidence laid bare in black and white. Gasps. A cough. Someone whispered the word fraud. Lena's smile faltered, then cracked. Langford's jaw tightened. The Blackwood negotiator's face went pale. This was bigger than a stolen slide. This was a rot at the core. How did you get this? Langford demanded, rising. His voice was cold as winter. He looked like a man balancing on a cliff who suddenly felt the ground tremble. Does it matter? I said. You engineered a lie. You laid a trap that would cost this company everything. You used my work as bait. David, my quiet ally, stood up from the corner as if he suddenly had wings. We cross-checked everything, he said. The timestamps, the transfers, this is clean. Phones were out. Calls were being made. The CEO's smile had disappeared. People whispered the word lawyers. Someone said pause the merger, and then, as if the universe had a sense of timing crueler than mine, the Blackwood negotiator stood and left the room without a word. Chaos moved in like a tide. Executives whispered about market fallout, SEC audits, reputations burning. Lena started to talk flustered denials, shaky pleas that it was misunderstood. Langford looked like a man cataloging his own ruin. I felt a current of triumph and a flash of something else, fear. Because when you shine a light on a giant, sometimes it swings back. They escorted me out, not forcefully, politely, as if they were shepherding a wounded animal. But the damage was done. The CEO called an emergency suspension of the merger. Blackwood froze talks. The news had not yet leaked, but the air smelled like the beginning of a storm. They thought my appearance had been the end of it. They didn't know that the files on that USB were just the opening move, and someone inside was about to press a button that would make all of our names headline news. By the next morning, the news had broken louder, faster, and bloodier than I ever imagined. 4-0 million merger suspended amid corporate espionage allegations. My phone lit up like a slot machine. Dozens of messages, missed calls, and one from David that just said, "It's out." Someone, maybe David, maybe someone on the board, had leaked the package to the press. Every email, every transaction, every digital breadcrumb was now public property. My name wasn't mentioned, but insiders knew. They always know. I watched from my small apartment, TV glowing in the half-dark. Reporters stood outside the building I once called home. Executives dodged questions. Langford was unavailable for comment. Lena had taken a personal leave of absence. In other words, they were drowning. I should have felt victorious. But instead, I felt empty. All I'd wanted was justice, recognition for what I'd built, for what I'd lost. Instead, the company was collapsing, stock prices tanking, employees getting laid off. Innocent people who'd smiled at me in the hallway were paying the price for what Lena and Langford did. The phone rang again. "David, Cass, you need to hear this," he said, his voice shaking. "What happened?" "Langford's lawyer is spinning it. He's saying you doctored the files. They're trying to pin the leak on you." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. "They can't prove that." "They don't have to prove it," David said quietly. "They just have to make people believe it." Panic clawed at me. I opened my inbox, hundreds of messages, reporters, anonymous threats. One email stood out. From unknown@securemail.com, subject, "You're next." I stared at it, heart pounding. Someone inside wasn't finished. That night, I didn't sleep. I paced, drank cold coffee, and watched the city lights blur through my window. I thought revenge would give me peace, but now it felt like I'd started a wildfire I couldn't contain. Still, a small, defiant voice inside me whispered, "You didn't lie. You told the truth, and the truth has a way of surviving, even when everything else burns." By morning, I knew what I had to do. If they wanted a villain, I'd give them one, but on my terms. Because I still had one final piece of evidence no one had seen. Something that would bury Langford, clear my name, and finally close the book. I walked into the news station that afternoon with the last file in my hand, ready to tell the world everything they'd tried to hide. The newsroom smelled like coffee and adrenaline. Reporters started between desks, phones ringing off the hook, screens flashing breaking headlines. I stood at the front desk, clutching the USB drive so tightly it left marks on my palm. "Hi," I said to the receptionist, my voice steadier than I felt. "I have information about the Langford-Blackwood merger scandal." It's time people heard the full story. Within minutes, I was led into a small glass-walled studio. Bright lights, microphones, and a journalist named Maya Torres, the kind of woman who could smell deceit before it spoke. She shook my hand firmly, eyes sharp. "We've been expecting someone like you," she said. "But I need proof, real, verifiable proof." I slid the USB across the table. "Everything you need is on their financial trails, hidden correspondence, whistleblower logs. But I'm not here for fame. I just want the truth out," she nodded, inserting the drive. As the files loaded, I watched her expression shift from curiosity to shock. "My God," she whispered. "He bribed federal auditors?" I leaned forward. "Langford didn't just manipulate numbers. He falsified entire compliance reports. The merger wasn't just unethical, it was illegal." The camera crew moved into place. The red recording light blinked on. Maya looked into the lens. "We're 11-5, when she began the interview. Her tone was professional, but her eyes carried empathy. "Cassandra, you've been accused of leaking confidential corporate data. Do you deny it?" I took a deep breath. "No, I don't deny exposing corruption. I deny doing anything wrong. They fired me for protecting my integrity. I didn't destroy the company, they destroyed themselves." There was a pause, then applause from behind the camera. Small, hesitant, but real. The truth had weight. It filled the room. By the time the interview ended, my name was trending across every major network. Some called me reckless. Others called me a hero. And that night, when I checked the news, I saw a headline that made my chest tighten with relief and disbelief. CO Robert Langford, an associate, arrested for corporate fraud following whistleblower exposure. Lena's name was in the subheading. Her career gone. Her reputation shattered. For a long moment, I just sat there, silent. Not celebrating. Not crying. Just breathing. David texted me later. "You did it. It's over." But I knew better. It wasn't over. Not yet. Because the next morning, I got a letter in the mail, one that made my blood run cold. It was from Langford himself, written from prison, and it began with the words, "You think you've won, Cassandra, but you've only started something bigger." The envelope was thick, heavy, no return address, but I didn't need one. The handwriting on the front, slanted, confident, deliberate, belonged to Robert Langford. I sat at my kitchen table, heart pounding, Seattle's gray morning light spilling through the blinds. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "You think you've won, Cassandra, but you've only started something bigger." The merger was never the endgame. Blackwood was just a shell, a stepping stone. There are people far above me who don't like exposure, and they know your name now. I read it twice, maybe 3 times. Every line felt like a chill crawling down my spine. For months, my life had been consumed by revenge, justice, and survival, but I hadn't once thought about who else might be pulling strings behind Langford. Now I had to. I folded the letter slowly and stared out the window at the skyline that used to inspire me. It didn't look like opportunity anymore, it looked like a maze full of predators. My phone buzzed. David again, you okay? I texted back a photo of the letter. He called immediately. You can't ignore this, Cass. He's bluffing, maybe, but what if he's not? I sighed. If there's someone above him, they'll come for me quietly. I just need to stay ready. He hesitated. So, what now? I looked at the letter again. Its last line burned into my mind. You started a fire. Now let's see if you can survive the smoke. What now? Now, I prepare for round 2. That evening, I packed a small bag, laptop, drives, cash, burner phone. I wasn't running. Not exactly. But I needed distance, clarity, control. I checked into a cheap motel on the edge of the city, the kind with flickering neon lights and paper-thin walls. For the first time in months, I slept without alarms, without deadlines. And when I woke up, something inside me had shifted. Revenge had been my weapon, but truth, I realized, was my shield. I wasn't just Cassandra Wilson, the executive assistant they fired. I was Cassandra Wilson, the woman who brought down a corrupt empire. And if there were others behind Langford, I'd expose them too, one by one, because once you've lost everything, fear stops mattering. Only purpose remains. Weeks later, when the FBI came knocking with new evidence and asked for my help, I knew this story wasn't ending, it was only evolving. 3 weeks later, they came for me, only this time, it wasn't corporate security. It was the FBI. 2 agents, suits pressed sharp, badges glinting. They knocked at my motel door just after sunrise. Miss Wilson, the taller one said, voice calm but serious. We're investigating a broader network tied to the Langford-Blackwood merger. We believe you have files that could help us. I stared at them, heartbeat thudding in my ears. You mean the people behind him? He nodded. Yes, offshore accounts, shell companies connected to federal contracts. You started a fire, Miss Wilson, and now it's spreading. I let them in. Coffee still warm on the counter, laptop open from a sleepless night. I handed them the drives, the ones I'd kept hidden since the leak. As they scrolled through data, one agent murmured, these files could trigger congressional hearings. I almost laughed. Then let's make sure they do. They asked me to testify, to help connect digital trails and explain the internal structure of the company. I agreed, but only under protection. I wasn't naive anymore. I'd seen what power did when cornered. In the days leading up to my statement, reporters camped outside the courthouse. David checked on me daily, his tone softer now. You sure you want to keep going? Yes, I said. I didn't come this far to stop halfway. The hearing was brutal. Hours of questions, faces of disbelief, some admiration, some doubt. But every time I faltered, I remembered Lena's smirk, Langford's arrogance, the boardroom that erased me. That memory fueled me. When the committee finally adjourned, I stepped outside to a wall of cameras and microphones. For a second, I froze. Then a woman shouted, Cassandra, are you proud of what you did? I met her gaze and said, I'm proud I told the truth. Applause broke out, not loud, but real. The kind that comes from people who've been stepped on and silenced too. That night, I went home, my new home, a small apartment overlooking the water, and opened my email. Among the flood of messages was one from an unknown sender. Subject, you don't know me, but you saved my life. I was going through the same thing at my firm. Because of you, I spoke up. For the first time since it all began, I cried. Not from anger, not from fear, from release. Months later, when a major network offered me a chance to share my full story on national television, I realized revenge had turned into something much greater, a movement. The night before the broadcast, I couldn't sleep. The producers had promised a primetime slot, your story, unfiltered, they said. But I knew how media worked. They wanted the drama, the scandal, the downfall. Still, I agreed. Because this wasn't just my revenge anymore, it was a reckoning. When the lights hit, I took a breath. Across from me sat the host, a woman known for her hard questions and unflinching gaze. Cassandra Wilson, she began. You were the executive assistant who brought down one of the most powerful corporate alliances in U.S. history. Why did you do it? I smiled faintly. Because they took what wasn't theirs. My work, my voice, my dignity. And I refused to let them profit off betrayal. As I spoke, footage rolled behind us, news clips, courtroom sketches, Lena's public apology, Langford being escorted out of the building in handcuffs. The host leaned forward. Do you consider this revenge? I paused. No, I said softly. Revenge was what fueled me. But what I got was justice. The studio went quiet. For a heartbeat, it felt like the whole country was holding its breath. After the show, social media exploded. Hashtag Cassandra Wilson trended for days. Women from tech firms, hospitals, even law offices shared their stories. Projects stolen, credit erased, voices ignored, messages poured in. You gave me courage, I finally quit. They'll never silence us again. Even David texted me that night. You changed more than a company. Cass, you changed the rules. I stared at that message for a long time. Then I looked at the skyline, the Space Needle glowing against the night. For years, that city had been a battlefield. Now, it felt like mine again, and somewhere, deep down, I knew Lena was watching too. I hoped she understood now what betrayal costs. I turned off my phone, opened my laptop, and began writing. Not a report, not an expose. A book. The first line read, My name is Cassandra Wilson. I was an executive assistant once, but this is the story of how I stopped being silent. What happened next wasn't planned. But when my book hit bestseller lists and the people who'd tried to destroy me tried to buy me back, that's when the real power shift began. 6 months later, my book tour brought me back to the one place I swore I'd never return: Langford and Blackwood headquarters. It wasn't an act of nostalgia. It was poetic closure. The company had new owners now. The old guard was gone, Langford facing trial, Lena's assets frozen, the board under investigation. But when the HR director invited me to speak at their new ethics seminar on integrity in the workplace, I couldn't resist. As I walked through those glass doors, memories hit me like a wave: the late nights, the stolen files, the laughter that turned to knives. Only this time, I wasn't a shadow behind someone else's desk. I was the guest of honor. People whispered when they saw me, that's her, the one who brought it all down. I stood at the podium, facing a sea of nervous employees. Some of you may remember me, I began. I used to sit in that corner office right there where the coffee machine hums. I thought loyalty meant silence. It doesn't. I paused, scanning the room. Silence is how injustice survives. Speak, question, protect your work, your name, your worth. Because if you don't, someone else will take it and call it their own. The applause came slowly at first, then grew into a thunder of claps. When it ended, a young woman approached me. She looked barely 24. Miss Wilson, she said, her voice shaking. I was about to quit. But after your book, I stayed. I spoke up. I smiled, tears pricking my eyes. Good. Make noise. It's how change begins. That night, as I walked out into the cold Seattle rain, I realized something profound. Revenge hadn't destroyed me. It had rebuilt me. For years, I'd been the assistant behind someone else's power. Now, I was building my own. When the publisher later called to tell me that my book had sold over 2 million copies and that Netflix wanted the rights, I laughed out loud. Not out of greed but peace, because I finally understood justice isn't about getting even. It's about standing taller than the lies that try to bury you. And if you're watching this, tell me, would you have done the same? Would you have stayed silent? Or burned it all down like I did? Moral: sometimes revenge isn't fire. It's truth. And truth once spoken never goes back to sleep. Stood on my balcony, phone in hand, watching the Seattle skyline glitter below. Cassandra, my publisher said, Netflix is offering a full series deal. They want you as a consultant and the lead wants to meet you. I smiled, speechless for the first time in months. Once, I was just an assistant fighting to be heard. Now, the world wanted to listen. That night, I didn't celebrate with champagne or crowds. I opened my journal, the one I kept hidden through the chaos, and wrote a single line. Power reclaimed is power multiplied. A week later, I founded the Cassandra Foundation, dedicated to helping women protect their intellectual property and navigate corporate injustice. The first grant went to a young developer in Chicago. Her app idea had been stolen by her supervisor. I called her personally. Don't let them define your story, I told her. Write your own headline. Months rolled by. I gave talks at universities, met women whose eyes carried the same fire I once buried. Every time they thanked me, I told them the truth. I didn't do this alone. Every woman who refused silence stood beside me, even the ones I'll never meet. On the premiere night of Termination Revenge, I sat in the front row, lights dimming, cameras flashing. As the first scene played, my story unfolding through an actress's voice, I felt something shift inside. Not pride, not vengeance, peace. I turned to David, who had quietly supported me all this time. He whispered, "You did it," and I whispered back, "We did." When the credits rolled, the audience stood, applauding. I stepped outside into the cool night, the city humming with life. The air felt lighter now, like it had been waiting for this moment. If you're hearing my story, take this with you. Revenge is not about destruction. It's about restoration. It's about finding your strength in the ashes and daring to build again. So tell me, if they took everything from you, would you fight to get it back? Never underestimate the woman they tried to silence. Because when she rises, she doesn't come back for approval, she comes back for power. A year later, the world finally stopped whispering my name and started remembering it for what it meant. The show had gone global. My book sat on university reading lists. But the part that mattered most wasn't fame, it was the quiet messages I kept getting. Women from Kansas, Boston, Dallas, even one from a high school girl in Montana. I used your story to stand up for myself. My boss apologized after I spoke out. You made me believe I wasn't crazy. Every time. I saved their messages in a folder called Proof of Change. Because that's what this all was. Proof that truth, once set free, doesn't fade, it multiplies. The foundation grew faster than I expected. We offered legal help, workshops, even a startup incubator for women who'd been pushed out of companies. When Forbes called to put me on their top 50 women shaping corporate ethics list, I laughed. Not because it wasn't surreal, but because I finally understood. I didn't destroy a company. I exposed a system. One afternoon, I was invited to give a TED Talk in New York. The stage was massive. My palms trembled as I stepped into the spotlight. 2 years ago, I thought revenge would heal me. But what healed me was purpose. I told them everything, how anger built my armor, but truth rebuilt my life. The audience rose when I finished, clapping like thunder. And when I walked off that stage, I felt no weight on my shoulders, only lightness. Later that evening, I took a walk through Central Park, just me and the hum of the city. For once, I didn't need to win anything. I didn't need validation. I was free. I sat on a bench, watching the skyline turn gold, and whispered to myself, "It's over." And I won. Then I smiled, because deep down, I knew it wasn't really the end. It was the beginning of something much larger than me. Final reflection. Revenge gives you power. Forgiveness gives you peace. But truth gives you forever. 5 years later, I stood on a stage in Washington, D.C., staring out at a crowd of young women in crisp blazers and wide, hopeful eyes. Behind me, a banner read, "The Cassandra Foundation. 5 years of courage." The applause faded as I stepped to the microphone. For a moment, I just looked at them, the future leaders, dreamers, and fighters, and thought of everything it took to get here. I once thought revenge was the end of my story. I began. But it turned out to be the beginning. What they stole from me forced me to build something they could never touch. My purpose. The room was silent, listening. I could almost see my younger self sitting in the back row, still afraid, still small. I smiled at her, in my mind, and kept going. I built this foundation so no woman would ever have to whisper her ideas again. So no one's brilliance would be buried under someone else's name. When the event ended, a girl about 20 came up to me, clutching a folder. "Miss Wilson," she said shyly, "I'm working on a startup, and your story gave me the courage to pitch it. I just wanted to say thank you." I squeezed her hand. "Don't thank me," I said softly. "Go change the world." As she walked away, I looked out at the crowd one last time, feeling peace settle in my chest. No more anger, no more fire, just light, because the best revenge isn't winning, it's becoming untouchable. If you followed my story, ask yourself this: if someone betrayed your trust, took your dream, erased your name, would you stay silent? Or would you rise louder than ever? Tell me in the comments, what would you have done in my place? And don't forget to subscribe for more real stories of power, truth, and women who refuse to stay quiet. Final moral: they tried to erase her name. Instead, she became the name everyone remembered.